Greetings, welcome to the SciFi Pubcast, the podcast that tries to be a pub and perhaps someday a pub that tries to be a podcast. And as always, we are looking for customers to come visit our bar. So if you're passionate about something and want to be on a podcast, please let us know, because this bar is all about community. And I'm looking around, and I have my two dedicated staff members. We have Carrie Simpson and Derek Beebe. Carrie, how you doing?
I'm mostly awake. I guess that's a start, right?
Hey, that's more than I am usually. Today's been an exception to the rule, so good to see you.
You mean you're not hungover today?
No, I've been kind of sick last couple of days, so I've been avoiding the booze, so to speak. Yeah.
Doesn't alcohol kill germs, though?
Maybe some germs and probably create some other health issues, but yeah, I don't know. It's a give and take. Yeah, really it is, I suppose.
It is.
And it's, well, first thing, and it's, my God, Derek, you're here. You made it, man.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's go back to Carrie. Carrie, how's LA doing?
What?
How's Los Angeles doing?
Los Angeles is warm and sunny, and I'm not going anywhere near it because I'm going to be inside hiding from the world for the rest of the day.
Hey, there's nothing wrong.
It's 70 degrees outside.
My God, that's horrendous.
I know.
Says the guy who's living in Ottawa right now. It's actually
this is called February in California.
In Ottawa,
February in
it's
Angeles.
called Winterlude. People are like skating on the canal and tobogganing and all good fun snowy stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Snow.
Yes.
It's nice to look at from here on Facebook. You know,
It's actually snowing outside my window right now.
Yes. So how's Pennsylvania and winter and all that good stuff, Derek?
It actually hasn't been that cold, and we've only had a couple snow days so far.
Oh, yeah?
So it's been pretty mild so far.
Cool. Anything new happening in your life, Derek?
No, pretty boring.
Well, it's kind of the doldrums of the season, isn't it, right? The weather, just work, yeah. I got nothing new in my life, but you know what's probably something new? What's happening in our kitchen? Because it's always good to ask what's happening in our kitchen.
He says that we instantly regret it.
I present to you today the flan in the high castle. Now, I'm not entirely sure what flan is, so what I did was I made banana pudding and mixed a lot of breadcrumbs in it. Is that kind of like what flan is?
No.
And then I put it like in a little like graham cracker castle.
Right.
So it's like a bread bowl you can eat out of.
Oh, okay.
I can't even.
Hey, I actually think that sounds edible, unlike most of the things I say. So
there you go. So it's like almost we're in like an alternative history where you actually went to cooking school for several years, and probably in this alternative history.
Wait. You're saying that there's an alternative history where Derek and I traded places, and I'm the one making shit up.
Oh yeah, and it's more than that because in the alternative history world I'm thinking of, Derek actually has his own cooking podcast that he produces, and it has like 1 billion downloads, like an episode. I can see that, and he's about to sign a contract with Netflix for his own cooking show. I can see that.
I'm afraid. I'm very afraid.
Yes. You know. Look at Derek.
So this is some bizarre, twisted world where I'm rich and successful and have a girlfriend?
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Yes. Because people like actually.
I can't even handle that.
That's some real Twilight Zone stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
Or should I say Black Mirror?
Yeah, there's that too. Yes. Ooh, nice one. Nice reference. Let's see. Joel's World, nothing new. I'm still in somewhat limbo at work. I don't know where I'm going to end up. It's going to be like this for several months, and I'm drinking green tea right now. So, yes, there you go. A little bit of housekeeping. This episode and our show for this point forward is always released as a podcast. And it's on YouTube. We usually upload it to YouTube the day after it comes out as a podcast because it takes so much time to upload to YouTube because we're rendering video. So subscribe today, especially on YouTube, because it helps others find the show, as well as us like a positive review or like at least not a negative review. It's just trying to grow our community. We're also
you're rendering video? Are you giving me a festive mustache or something?
Oh yes, and I'm giving myself hair on my head too. No. Yes. Wait, didn't you? Well, that's right. You went to school for history, didn't you, Derek?
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely not like video production. Okay.
No.
No. Discord channel. Yes, we still have a Discord channel. Our invites are out each time we release an episode. It's a great source for news. I post lots of news articles there about entertainment and the industry itself. And sometimes we've had some good conversations. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's not. It's just like a real bar almost. It's amazing. And I should note, too, that our show is a general discussion show about science fiction topics, and it can get spoily at times. If we are going to spoil something completely, horrendous, we will hopefully say, hey, we're talking about this. But generally, yeah, there's going to be spoilers. At least not huge spoilers, but yeah, this is like a bar conversation. Anything really goes. Really. As for our beer, drink, restaurant podcast recommendation, yes, we're sticking with beer today. I'm still going through the beer I got over the Christmas period, so I can recommend highly the Flying Dog Brewery Canine Winter Warmer. It's a strong English ale teeming with deep malty flavor and nutty spiciness, brewed with cardamom, vanilla, and chocolate. That's from their webpage, folks. This brewery is from Maryland, of all places. So shout out to Mike and his family, who is also from Maryland and probably drinks and stuff. So Canine Winter Warmer. It's a strong alcohol beer, so in other words, it's 7.4%. It's quite bitter somewhat. So it's like 34 out of 100 on the IBU scale. But I definitely recommend it if you're out, say, tobogganing in the snow or skating on the Rideau Canal or living in Pennsylvania like Derek is. So there's that. But enough about all this housekeeping and beer discussion, because we're here to talk about alternative histories and fiction. Fair play? That's the topic's name. So I like that. Fair play? Get it? Oh, well. Oh, dear, yes. History is just that. History. Historians spend their time arguing what happened in the past and the reasons why events happened, and people did what they did and thought the way they thought. When the facts are played with, it innately has an inherent sense of fraud. Yes. It's like, wait, you're screwing with facts that people generally agreed upon. In fiction, when people know it's made up, well, providing alternative histories can be a valuable storytelling device. I am still not a fan, so let's talk about it. And before we begin...
Wait, you're not a fan of alternate histories, or you're not a fan of history in general?
Oh, I'm a fan of history. I have a university degree in history. It's my first degree, and I love my history.
Me too.
Not a great way to make a living as an academic. You have to specialize within such a narrow confines once you get to the PhD level. But I think history is a great foundation for the study of law or any advanced degree. But that's just me. I'm a generalist. Right. The reason I came up with this topic today because I finally got around to watching The Man in High Castle, which is on Amazon Prime. I'm about 2 episodes into season 3 of 4 seasons now, and I don't know. The first couple of episodes, I'm shaking my head. It's good. It's not great. It's pissing me off, and I have to talk about it.
How does it piss you off?
Yeah, before we get there, let's just say a few things, because what it is, it's an alternative take on World War II, loosely based off the Philip K. Dick's novel from 1962 of the same name. It's created by Frank Spotnitz. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. At least I'm saying Frank right, at least. And it's asks the question, what happens when, if the Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan won the Second World War, and how do they govern the world afterwards, especially in North America? So imagine North America with the East being part of the Reich, and the West Coast being part of the Japanese Empire, and there's a neutral area that goes to the middle around the Rocky Mountains. So, yeah, it's interesting. Lots of flashbacks to World War II, at least the ideologies and the symbolisms and the uniforms, all that hot button, emotional triggering type stuff. This TV show has The Man in High Castle. And I'm just looking at it going, I can see what they're doing, and it has some merit, but God, it pisses me off.
What pisses you off about it?
What pisses you off?
Yes, thanks. What pisses me off? Well, let me start. I think it's fairly like a cheap gimmick. It's a cheap form of storytelling in many ways because, like things like, okay, you're telling me we have the Axis powers occupying fairly effectively North America, especially to the United States of America, and there's still a big population of people in the States. Now, I just think personal gun ownership in the States is so high. This almost every American I know has access to guns. I just don't see America being occupied anytime soon. I think Americans would generally die. That's just I can't suspend my disbelief for that. It's like what? How can you occupy the States? You can destroy the States. It's different than occupying the States.
Well, I guess that depends. I guess that depends on how the states are taken over, because that's something I hear. It's an argument I hear a lot of when people talk about defending the Second Amendment and all that, is like, the people who are so gung-ho with the Second Amendment don't take into account tanks. A machine gun versus a tank is not going to help.
Yeah, I can see that. But
if the Nazis and the Japanese dropped a whole bunch of tanks into the country,
right,
and just rolled on through, probably, or I mean, the Germans were coming up with a form of nuclear bomb before we did.
Yeah, I think that's fairly believable in the series, The Men in High Castle. How they actually beat the States and the Allies is by dropping an atomic bomb on Washington, D.C. And then very similar to what happened in Japan in real life with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Eventually, the government of the day is destroyed, or in this case, surrenders. Right. So.
Right.
Or I should say, in this fiction series, I think probably the power that the people in control were probably killed in Washington, D.C., and then everything fell to pieces, and eventually the U.S. surrenders. Whereas, of course, in real life, in World War II, the United States purposely did not hit Tokyo. They went to lesser targets because they wanted to have a peaceful transition afterwards. And they ostensibly, I can't say the word, but they said they were going after military targets, and of course, a lot of civilians died. So there's that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of talking, and I have a few more points. I know Derek wants to weigh in on this. Just a few other things that just I shake my head. Is like, okay, the whole crossing the Atlantic Ocean business with an invading army. Yeah, that would probably be very, very hard. Now, in this series, you have rocket planes, so okay, maybe. What else is there? I'm just shaking my head. Yeah, like what happened to Russia? Yeah, it just, we can go on and on. Derek, you're quiet. What do you think, man?
So I only just started watching this weekend for the podcast. It's something that's long been on my to-do list, but I never got around to it. I am about 7 episodes into it. I saw the pilot and I loved it. I was like, wow, this is so intriguing. So in the pilot, like Joel said, it's about America being occupied by the Nazis and Japan. But what the series is actually about is there's some underground resistance that has these film reels from our Earth. So like somehow the film reels have come from an alternate dimension to show people a world where the Allies won the war. And that's kind of the central mystery of the show. Now, unfortunately, that mystery hasn't been developed at all in all the episodes that I've watched. So I've started getting a little bored with it. But that was an incredible hook. And there was another hook as well at the end of the pilot that I won't say. But yeah, the pilot was very intriguing. It had some really good central mysteries, and it was a very interesting world to be in. But as I'm going through the first season, it is kind of plotting and going on. Now, as to the likelihood of the invasion happening, yeah, you're right. It would be very awkward to make a cross-Atlantic amphibious invasion in the 1930s or 40s. But Now, I don't know a lot of details about this world from what I've seen. All I know is that Germany has jet bombers and Japan does not. Germany has the A-bomb. I don't think Japan does. Germany nuked Washington, D.C. and then America surrendered. So
But wait.
presumably, yeah.
Yeah, but okay, did the Chicago Cubs still win the World Series in 2016?
That I don't know. Wait, this is only in the 60s.
I know.
So
Give it time. It might be on for another 40 years. No, go on.
So presumably, if Germany has nuclear bomb laden jet bombers, they basically don't have to stage a massed manned invasion. All they have to do is send these bombers over and nuke one city at a time until the country surrenders. So presumably that was the threat that caused us to keel over. And once the U.S. government and the U.S. military agrees not to fight, I mean, no matter how many people have guns, they're not just going to be like, manning the Normandy beaches as the German army comes in. They wouldn't be able to stop it. And the other thing I was thinking about while you were talking was that, well, yes, obviously Americans had, rifles and pistols back then. I don't think the average American had access to machine guns. I know the mob had Tommy guns and stuff, but I just don't think enough people would have had anything more than a single shooter to really make a difference against a properly armored military.
Right, but you're assuming that there's manpower. There's enough manpower for the Nazis to actually occupy, right? And this is the whole thing with insurrections, is that it gets to a point where it may not be worth occupying it if it's costing you, in terms of finances, your economies, right? Okay, in terms of manpower and just the cost of it, of the occupation. And in this
that's true.
Yeah,
because they would need so many people just to hold on to Europe, let alone America.
Yeah, and especially when you're tied up with racial ideology of the Nazis, which this show actually does fairly well in terms of extrapolating how they would use their beliefs in the 30s and how would they use it during occupation if they won the Second World War in the 40s and 50s, both the Japanese side and the Nazi side of the Axis. So, I don't know. Carrie, you're looking for Plex.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, people have been telling me I need to watch Man in the High Castle. I do occasionally like a good alternate history. I love the Mirror Universe stuff in Star Trek. One of my favorite book series is called Anno Dracula. It's basically, what if Dracula had won? And the line of thought that would have reverberated throughout history if Dracula had taken over England and stuff like that. It sounds really, really bad to say it, but I get really, really bored by the constantly having to rehash World War II. It's an important moment in history. The Holocaust is something that needs to be remembered, but it's like German history tends to begin and end with World War II. No one ever talks about anything prior to that, and it gets like, come on. I mean, this is a group of people that basically ruled Europe for 1,000 years. Why are we only concentrating on this very, 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 very sad and tragic part of their history that is going to follow them around like for the rest of all time?
Yeah, let me just jump on this because I agree with you. I think if you look at from a historian perspective, the Nazi Party or National Socialism was only in power in Germany for 12 years. That's how long the Reich lasted in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this series, not besides the fact that I find it to be very melodramatic over stuff. I just think that if you are a German in today's world or a Japanese fellow or from either of these countries in terms of your ancestry and watching The Man in High Castle, how does that make you feel? Because the entire show is there to trigger, the American buttons, because even the American flag has a swastika in the corner of it, right? And just looking at it, and they talk about the Jewish issue, and there's characters in the TV series who are Jewish, and they lend to their certainty, the resistance, and I just think it's cheap. I just think we're dealing with too much real history that is still very much alive for many people and in many areas of the world, and it's just there's too in your face.
Yeah, and I don't know. I kind of I really can't speak to the show that or the book, having not seen or read either. But yeah, just there, like I said, there's more to it than there's more to Germany than just those 12 years. I mean, there's all the stuff there's all the German history prior to that, and then there's how the rise and fall of the Third Reich has had a lasting effect on German society in general. I mean, and I have cousins over there, and when my family and I have gone to visit my cousins in Germany, we've talked about German history, and Germans are taught not to be proud of their country. Why? Because German nationalism is too synonymous with Nazism.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine if there was even an iota of national shame in this country that there is in Germany?
Yeah.
I mean, you hardly ever, outside of soccer games, you hardly ever see the German flag waving anywhere except around their federal buildings.
Yeah. I'd be shocked if this TV show is allowed to be seen in Germany, quite frankly, because I know there's free speech laws, but I know they really do not, it's illegal to have swastikas, for instance, right? I'm not sure how that translates in art. So in this,
it's illegal to deny the Holocaust over there, and I mean we have free speech over here, so that means anyone can say anything they want, and if people want to think that the Holocaust was a hoax, then they are free to do and say that here, but not over there. Yeah. I think that denies history in a way that is scary.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at it from more of a literary device because I spent several years studying German history, and I knew a lot of Germans and during my undergraduate days, and I'd been over there a few times. And then in the 19th century, we considered Germany to be the good guys, and the First World War happened, and suddenly they're the bad guys, and then the Second World War, and they're the real bad guys, and then during the Cold War, at least 2/3 of West Germany were our friends, and now they're our friends. This is just history unfolding itself, right? From a literary point of view, using history, I think, is good, but when there's a point of divergence, and to how long, I think it's a matter of degrees.
Well, and that is if you look at what's going on today, Germany is kind of like the moral center of the Western world right now, and that juxtaposition is kind of freaky. Yeah. If you think about it, it's no, suddenly the Germans are the voice of reason on lots of issues, and just and this country really isn't at the moment. So just one last thing, because I know we're more down the rabbit hole of history than literature, and then I'm going to turn over to Derek, because Derek's been very patient. Is that remember most of the Napoleonic era, Prussia was allied with Great Britain, so which is interesting. Okay, over to you, Derek.
All right, so I have a counterpoint to that. I personally don't mind that we're constantly telling World War II stories over and over again, because World War II is one of the most pivotal moments of human history, and it's the one that still exists within living memory for us. We still have people who are alive in that war.
I'll give you
And
that.
when I was a history major, World War II is actually what made me a history major. When I was reading about it in high school, I was so fascinated by it because it really is the greatest and the worst story ever told. It's the heights and the lows of humanity. And there were so many moments where humanity was on the brink of falling into complete darkness. The entire world, not just Europe, not just one country, but the entire world could have been conquered by the Axis powers. And there were just a few battles where it could have gone either way, like Midway or Normandy or the Battle of the Bulge. And if something had just gone a little differently, the Allies would have lost. And I mean, maybe eventually Germany would have imploded. You know, maybe Hitler would have been assassinated or there would have been a civil war or something. But it was so close so many times. And I think it's important that we never forget that lesson, that we never forget what can happen if you allow evil men to take power in government. And if you just stand by and do nothing and you think, oh, it won't happen to me, or, oh, they're not that bad. You know, they say these horrible things, but they'll never actually do these things. I think we need to never forget that. And I think that that's really the purpose of fiction, of media, is to tell these stories and to teach the next generation right and wrong.
Oh no, I agree. I agree as far as that's concerned. I just, you know, and I get that because of all those arguments, that is a good jumping off point for how to tell a story about, well, what if this had happened instead of that? What if, you know, what if Germany had won instead of the rest of Europe? It's just I don't know. I sometimes I feel like there are other points in history that people could use. Maybe earlier in our history, maybe or I don't know what I'm saying, but you know, and you know, start the study from there. Start from somewhere other than World War II. Not that it's not important. Just, you know, like go back to, you know, what if Britain had won the Revolutionary War?
Yeah, what happened if the Chicago Cubs won the World Series in 2016? Oh, right. Sorry.
You're really harping on that one.
Yeah, you're really obsessed with this. I don't get this ball sports type stuff.
You know, there's a lot of fiction work out there. It's been around for this subgenre of science fiction has been around for a long time. And some of the stories are like time travel stuff. Some of it's parallel universes. Some of it just, there's a point of divergence. Like we talked about Star Trek. How many timelines are there in Star Trek right now? 3?
Well, there's the novels. There's the official canon one. There's the Abram verse one.
Yeah, there's JJ Trek, there's the prime timeline, and then there's the mirror universe, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, and it's because one's called Kelvin, right? Kelvin timeline and
the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah, that's what they call the Abrams verse.
Yeah.
Great, and so we have that. But even things like, okay, I love my film, right? Yeah. Quentin Tarantino. You may have heard of him. He's done 2 movies where it's an alternative history take on it. Now, you know, we have Inglourious Bastards, right? Which is a great film, actually. But it's from 2009, and it's a comedy, and they changed the ending, you know? Spoiler alert.
I was shocked when that happened.
Alert.
I was like, oh, they're doing that?
Right? And because it's all about empowerment, right? So you have the Jewish resistance fighters in Europe, American military, right? Okay. And they went and they killed Adolf Hitler. Wow. And then they went home to the families. It's amazing.
Well,
okay.
That was a cathartic moment.
Yeah, it's all part of our relationship.
I mean, there is a kernel of truth in that, is that because there was a plot to kill Hitler, and unfortunately, Germans are very bad with contingency plans. They didn't understand. They didn't think that a solid oak desk would have saved him. But maybe if someone else had tried to plan the assassination, it might have gone off without a hitch.
Yeah. But then you
would that have solved all of the problems with bringing down the Third Reich? Maybe, maybe not.
Well,
Who knows?
that's what historians ask themselves generally, right? Okay, because there's the great men. There's mostly men with some women, right? Because that's what they pay attention to in the ancient histories and classics of history, right? The great person theory. Well, most historians reject that because a lot of it has to do with other forces, economics, religion, society. It's like building. It's like playing a game of civilization. One of the civilization moves, right? Who knows how things are going to unfold? Maybe if a butterfly flaps its wing in the South Pacific, that could have changed the course of human history. I have no idea.
Yeah,
it could be a pretty bad story.
Yeah, that's why these alternate history stories are so fascinating, because one tiny change can alter the course of human history, even if it's not in World War II.
Yeah.
Oh. Right.
And
yeah, I mean, turning the German fighter pilots in World War I into vampires, actually didn't save the Germans, but I mean, it was interesting, at least.
Oh God, I'm trying not to make a pun here. Okay. So Tarantino again. There's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Isn't this up for a bunch of Oscars this month? Have you guys seen that movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
No, not yet.
I saw it.
It's great. Actually, it worked very, very well. It's fiction. And they did change some history by playing with some facts with the Charles Manson's murders, right? But it did it in such an interesting way. It's not like, hey, yes, Germany conquered and occupied the United States after the Second World War. It's not the big macro changes. It's the small changes in history. So I'm citing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as an example where alternative history actually makes a lot of sense, and it worked very, very well. At least that's my take. And since we're on this, I've watched my first TV series off of Apple. Was it Apple TV?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I bought an iPhone recently, so I have a year free subscription. None of their programming quite interests me, but I did watch the first season. There's only one season. The second season is, I think, coming in sometime soon. But I'm talking about For All Mankind, which is astronauts 1960s space race thing. That's
something I want to see eventually. I've got too much stuff on my plate right now to watch it, but I think when summer comes around and things are and the my viewing schedule is less hectic, I may start that one. I did watch through C, which was very, very interesting, but it's not alternate history, so it's not part of our subject matter today.
And I'm watching For All Mankind and contrast that with The Man in High Castle, because I had to leave Men in High Castle for a period of time because it just got on my nerves so much, and I went For All Mankind. And the premise For All Mankind, the Apple TV show, is it asks the question: what would happen if the global space race never ended and the Soviet Union sends the first man on the moon and actually beats the U.S. from doing so? So you have the space race happening, and it's all from like the Apollo era. So it's some really neat visuals, very neat how they depict NASA in that world, and you have differences in who's president of the day. You have Nixon, and Nixon finally gets tossed out, and guess who's president?
Who?
Teddy Kennedy.
No, Teddy Kennedy?
Okay.
Nice.
So it's
interesting.
So it's around the same time as like other things that happen in real life happen in the series, but it's just these small little differences. So you don't know which astronauts are going to die. You don't know what rockets or what space missions is going to fail or blow up. So it's interesting because it's not over the top. Yes.
Well, I mean, there's a bit of alternate history in The Watchmen. Because in the original,
no spoilers, please. I didn't watch it yet.
I haven't. No, I'm not even talking about. I'm not even talking about the show. But the original graphic novel, Nixon never resigns.
Yeah.
So I mean, and he uses Dr. Manhattan to win the Vietnam War and basically annex Vietnam into the country. So I mean, that is kind of freaky.
Yeah. So I think I think the more realistic the series is, the more it pushes back against suspending your disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
If it's outright fantasy, if it's the Avengers, if it's you just mentioned the Watchmen. Yeah, I can see that because anything goes. It's like X-Men. Things happen, right? That's
Uh-huh.
when it's like, oh, all real life stuff that people study, and either Nazi Germany and the Wehrmacht and the Schutzstaffel, the SS, in Men in High Castle, or is the Apollo space program in For All of Mankind? Now we're talking still about degrees. It's like, I don't know. And then, like, my question is, the new TV show that's going to be on Disney Plus in 2021 by Marvel Studios. What if?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't that be neat? What if? We start asking these questions. They're doing the thought experiment. I can't wait to see if it works or not, because it's going to subvert every single thing we like about our existing superheroes and turn them on its head or on their head.
Well, I mean, they already did that with Endgame, though, because yeah, it's nice that by the end of Endgame, Steve has gone back and married Peggy, but if you think about it, that is complete bullshit.
Yeah,
because the Steve Rogers who we know and love, who likes to follow the rules, wouldn't have done something selfish like that, for one thing, and for another thing, that completely negates everything Peggy did after Steve went into the ice. So, what are you trying to say, that everything she did is meaningless because Steve had to go back and marry her? That's weird.
No, it's just different timelines with different.
There's a different timeline.
Yeah, and so it's a
But
divergence
still,
point. Yeah. So
yeah.
if you accept this, and a lot of theory is spoken about by physics people and philosophers about saying parallel universes. Well, it's probably out there. It probably happens. We just have to prove it, right? Okay, it's this state of consciousness. So it means that in an alternative universe, Derek could be an excellent cook.
Mm-hmm.
I could be a billionaire. I don't know. More than likely, I'll be living homeless off the street, but still,
Joel, quick question about this For All Mankind show. Is there any action in it, or is it just kind of like a drama?
It's melodrama. So
okay, and it's not like science fiction technology. It's 1960s era night technology.
Absolutely, it is.
Okay.
But they make a lot of reference to the existing space program in real life. So a lot of the references are actually, about that because if you know anything about the history of NASA, the name the astronauts, the accidents that happened in, say, in Apollo 1, you can put more meaning into this.
So Russia doesn't have a base on the moon or anything like that?
Well, not at the start of the series.
Okay.
So, things get interesting quite quickly without spoiling the show. There's also video games. What is it with alternative histories in video games? Because there's a lot of video games out there that people love, and it's all about these, let me go and shoot Nazi zombies. Or our friend, Renner Graham, messaged me the other day. And he apologizes for not making it today. Apparently, he's at the theater with his wife. I'm not sure if I should say that, but God bless him. But
he'll be mobbed by fans now.
Yes, there we go. At the theater. Yeah, what's the Super Bowl business? He doesn't care about that. So you remember playing this game? I think it was from the 80s. Command and Conquer: Red Alert.
Oh, I played that.
No.
That's from the mid to late 90s.
The 90s. And what's the premise is something similar. It's
like Russia has advanced Tesla technology, and they use it to take over the world or something.
Okay.
It's been a while.
I think Einstein travels back in time, and he meets a young Adolf Hitler. the two of them meet, and Einstein disappears from the timeline. So what would happen if Einstein wasn't around? Of course, that's going to have a direct correlation to the Manhattan Project and the development of the atomic bomb. Yes. Yeah, so the USSR invades China and Eastern Europe. So there's like basically, yeah, it's just the geopolitical dynamic changes, but it's a mess. The world is at war still. Sounds like a fun video game, right?
It was.
Yes. But there's that. There's other stuff as well. Comic books. I know we've mentioned this on previous episodes, but Superman. Remember Superman? Yeah, and there's of course Superman Red Sun, which is a great comic from 2003. That this was a 3-issue comic, which asked the question: what happens? What would happen if Superman had been raised in the Soviet Union?
Yeah, the movie version of it is going to be out, I think, in March.
I still need to read that comic book.
Is it going to be in Russian and just English subtitles? No. That would be amazing.
No. But they did a similar they did a version of the Red Sun storyline in the last season of Supergirl.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because they had the like a clone of Supergirl that ended up in Kaznia.
Okay.
And she spoke with a Kaznian accent.
No.
That is terrible, Derek. Never do that again.
Yeah. But there's lots of series out there. I know one author that we have to mention his name. I haven't read any of his stuff, but he's known as being the American alt history guy in science fiction. Is Harry Turtledove. So
I've seen his stuff. I haven't read it.
Yeah, he has
I know the name, but I never read it.
Yeah, he's like well published. Like there's dozens and dozens of books out there. There's an entire subgenre about what would happen if in the American Civil War if the South had won Gettysburg as a battle, the Battle of Gettysburg. So that's interesting.
That's interesting. I get why the show never off the ground, but you have that, but Benioff and Weiss couldn't get Succession off the ground,
right?
Or Secession off the ground.
Sorry, so there's actually a subgenre. So that's just one example of the subgenre. The Game of Thrones guys, they had this TV series in pre-production about what happened. The South won the American Civil War. Like it's like a trope from the Second World War. What happens if the Nazis won? It's like it's just similar, but it's an American Civil War context.
Yeah, I get why people were sensitive about having something like that be in in like the mainstream media, but at the same time, it's like, I mean, we have so many stories based on what would have happened if the Nazis had won World War II. How is this different? How is one okay and the other is not? I'm sure someone could explain it to me, and I would get it, but still, like.
Well,
okay.
Fortunately, in Man in High Castle, nobody's using any, very bad words in it.
Yeah, they changed the slang.
That true. Yeah. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, I think just because of the real world influences, they're not using any of the derogatory real world slangs. They actually created.
Yeah, I would not have been comfortable watching the show if they were using those words left and right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But then they've done so many summary executions in that TV series. It's like, oh my God, right? Is that what?
Right.
How is this enjoyable? Is this a story? Yeah, that's where
it's definitely not a laugh fest.
But I mean, okay, Joel, you could probably answer this without spoiling it too much. But the Holocaust is still going on.
No, it was pretty successful.
But so they pretty much wiped out all the Jews in Europe, and what happened with okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so you can do that, but you can't. Never mind.
Yeah, they don't really treat that because they do have one of the lead characters is Jewish, right? Who basically is like a third generation Christian because they had to change quite quickly,
Uh-huh.
and because Nazi Germany is enforcing racial laws still, right? And if you're Jewish, that's a one-way ticket to to be
To the gas
killed,
chamber.
right? Or more effective ways of killing people. Yeah, this is a
Right.
horrible topic. It's a horrendous topic.
It is a completely horrible thought, but at the same time, it's like, okay, so you can do a story about this, but you can't do it. Never.
So
it's
and another really good example for the Jewish question is there's a novel that won a bunch of awards in 2007. It's called The Yiddish Policemen's Union. It's by Michael Chabon. I'm probably not saying that right. Chabon. I'm not sure if it's a Cabon or Chabon, but it's a detective story, and it won like a bunch of awards. I'm sure it's going to become some sort of TV show or movie in the near future. Lots of Nebula awards, Locus Award, the Hugo Award for Best Novel, and it is an alternative series, like a detective noir series in alternative history where things happen in the Second World War, but instead of the state of Israel being founded, which it was destroyed in 1948, so there's a lot of refugees that actually settles in Alaska. So you have Sitka, Alaska, and it's like this very large Yiddish-speaking metropolis. And Michael Chabon sets this detective novel in this environment. So here's a way where, yes, he's changing his universe, right? There's an alternative history thing going on, but he's using it as a device to tell a detective story. I haven't read it. It looks really interesting. It's on my list of books to read. So, yeah, because when you're dealing with such big historical topics, when there was mass conflict with mass deaths, yeah, it's interesting as a thought experiment because you ask yourselves, well, in today's real world, what would happen if one force does this, or one factor happens, or one event happens? What's the consequences of it? It's cause and effect.
Right.
So it takes me back to my big questions at the start of the episode. Is using alternative histories a good storytelling device?
Well, I mean, I would like to think that I have enough faith in humanity that, if the Nazis had won, or if the South had won, that humanity would course correct and become better even under those circumstances. But current history is really challenging my ability to do that, to believe that.
Well, does human nature change?
Yeah, exactly.
I
don't know.
I think it does in many ways, but it's slow. It needs the test of time.
Well, I mean, you can even go into the future with like Star Trek. I mean, Gene Roddenberry's vision was that humanity would be better, and humanity would overcome the prejudices and everything among itself. But even if you're watching Picard, you see that it's still still hasn't overcome the prejudices for races outside of humanity. And it just illustrates that kind of society that someone like Gene Roddenberry wanted to exist requires a lot of work, and it requires not letting complacency take hold. So, I mean, if you become complacent, then you open the pathway to people coming in and picking apart, finding the weaknesses in the system, finding the weaknesses in ourselves. It requires constant vigilance.
It does indeed. Yes, it does.
As Professor Moody would say.
Yeah, look on the bright side. At least most people don't go out and try to steal the goats from the neighbors anymore, or the sheep.
Yeah.
In most cases.
And in some places, the goats and the sheep are hired out to be living lawnmowers, so that they don't help replenish the soil and all that.
Yeah, this is
So,
getting real bad. So let's turn over to Derek.
eh.
Derek, Derek, what do you think?
I
You're
have
too quiet,
one of the
Derek.
novel series on your list is actually something that I read, the Temeraire series by Naomi Novak.
Hmm.
This is an alternate history where, oh God, it's been so many years ago now, but basically the Napoleonic Wars with dragons in it. So
Interesting.
instead of like ship battles, they get on flying dragons and they shoot fire at each other. And I read the first few books in it, and it was pretty good, but very wordy because it was written in a kind of 1800s, 1700s style. It was very, stoic and purple prose and all that sort of thing. So, but it was an interesting story.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I haven't read this yet, but Joel, this was on your list, and I suddenly remembered I own it. Weapons of Choice by John Birmingham.
Okay.
I haven't read it yet, but it's basically a version of the movie The Final Countdown, where a modern day, or in this case, futuristic, actually it's the year 2021, so that's a year from now. A military experiment sends a multinational armada back in time to 1942, right into the middle of Midway, so a modern day American naval fleet shows up to change the course of World War II. So I'm looking forward to reading that one day.
Interesting. There was one, I just read the description. It's a Harry Turtledove book called The World Difference from 1990. I just looked it up. And he poses the question, what happens if world basically found intelligent alien life on Mars? How would that change things? So now instead of countries competing against each other, you have an outside external factor.
I think there would be sailors fighting in the dance hall.
Oh, my big thing, my question is, this is how my brain works. In this series, The Man in High Castle, I wonder if the Nazis has this, like in the 50s, if they had like a UFO craze. Or was that just in the States, in real life? Things to make you go, is that cultural, or is it because of the development of the atomic bomb? I don't know. Yeah, interesting questions. Any other thoughts before we kind of close the door for this episode? Because this is a pretty heavy episode in terms of seriousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies was The Final Countdown, which is about a modern day U.S. naval carrier going back in time to Pearl Harbor. And they end up deciding not to intervene and change history. But I was obsessed with that movie when I was a little kid. I would rent it over and over again at the video store. Hey. Because I was just obsessed with like aircraft carriers, and they actually filmed it on one. So it's just like, oh, look at the corridors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of raises the question: do you think the 2016 Chicago Cubs had some help from? Just saying.
I don't know. I don't know. This is a sports ball question. I don't care.
Okay. Yeah. Any last thoughts, Carrie?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it is a very fraught subject, and as you kept saying, the whole question of what if this had happened? What if this had happened? It's fascinating, and like I said, it makes you realize that things can't be taken for granted.
Yeah.
It's like you can't take for granted that humanity is going to course correct. You can't take for granted that something that should have that happened wouldn't have happened in other circumstances. Like it requires actual work, and I think people are there are too many people right now who don't want to do the work.
Yeah. Well,
and that is probably that may be what dooms the rest of us. Sorry, I'm bringing everyone down again.
No, it's good because I think that's kind of a common theme. What we do as in our existence, do we bear witness, or do we do more than that? And to quote the great Irish philosopher and politician Edmund Burke, or to paraphrase him, the only thing necessary for the victory of evil is for good men to do nothing.
Right.
So, sorry, I got most of the words right, but it's this notion where no, you can't be apathetic because that allows evil to happen.
Right. You can't be apathetic. You can't be complacent. You can't. You can't do nothing when there's injustice because at some point you're going to turn around and the injustice is going to be visited upon you if you're not if you don't stand up and say no, this is wrong.
Yeah, and then of course that raises its own question: what is justice on these big, large items? I think there's no debate whatsoever, right? There's black and white, but there's so many things that's in the gray,
right?
And I think storytelling is a good way to try to understand that and to identify things and to provoke people both emotionally and intellectually to do stuff with their lives, to inspire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Now I'm sounding like a poet, which I maybe should become one day, but oh God, this is interesting.
I just remembered one final recommendation. I read this series back in around 2000 or so. It was a book series called What If? And it was a series of short essays written by famous historians describing what would have happened if one battle went a different way. And it was nice little 20-page essays. I know that there were 3 that I read back around 2000, but they weren't all about World War II. Some of them were about, older battles, but a lot of them were World War II. And it was really fascinating to have these famous historians who know better than anybody describe what would have happened if this had gone the other way and how that would have changed history going forward decades or centuries into the future. It really is, everything can be changed by one small moment.
Yeah, and not just the bigger things, the small things. Like in real life, my grandfather fought in the Pacific against the Japanese. He was an aircrew on bombers with the U.S. Army Air Corps. He crashed a couple of times. He had reconstructive surgery on his face. He came home after the war and was an asshole. And that fleshed down and had consequences with my mom and all my family. These things are generational, right?
Right.
It's the small things. It's like, so when I have a TV show called the Man in the High Castle, it evokes a lot of emotions. You can't help it. It's there to trigger you. Now, it can trigger you in a good way for these thought exercises, but it can also be at risk of being like a cheap way out as a literary device. So I think my summation is use alternative histories with caution. They can work, but sometimes you lose sight of the story itself because you're so busy tied up with the emotional triggers. That's my take. There you go. All right, let's close the doors to the SciFi Pubcast. Well, let's see. In our closing, Discord. Yes, join our Discord server. It's a little chat group, text chats. Our invite will be found wherever you find this show in our social media. And we're also on YouTube, so you can see our pretty faces. I might have an ugly face, but Derek and Carrie have pretty faces. And please subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Our social media channels. Yes, we're on Twitter. That's done by me. It's focused on more sci-fi and industry news. It can be found at SciFi Pubcast. I also do the Instagram, which is basically pictures related to anything to do with drink, food, restaurants. Derek,
yes,
my friend, you do the Facebook page, and you do one hell of a job. Good on you, sir. So we can also be found by email. Yes, you can email us at management@scifipubcast.space. That's about it. Carrie, what's your Twitter address?
My Twitter handle is Carrie Blackfire42. That's KERI Blackfire42.
And Derek, what's yours?
I'm at Derek J. Beebe.
And my Twitter address is at Joel, JOEL _ Welch, WELCH. Take care. It's closing time. Please make it home. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Music provided courtesy of Logan Rathbone. Podcast logo by Jea Rhea. Copyrighted Joe Welch. Listen responsibly, and we can't wait for your next visit to our fine establishment. Cheers.